There we go.
And the room. So you can't mute from there.
I can't mute on Zoom because then it's going to pop up on the card.
And you can't mute with the remote.
I can use the remote.
Now, can you hear me talk?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear it. Sorry.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, maybe it's just something about the settings. because the public input one's not needed, because that would,
No, because you don't want that muted. That's gotta be, it's fine. This is what I find a lot, and it doesn't make sense. Like the cart isn't smart enough to host the meeting and then have live stream and stuff. It can only be a smart participant. So now the other thing,
Okay, so we should be able to start hearing it on my computer in a minute.
Yep.
Can you hear it now?
Yep.
Then when we start, Jody.
I take it back again. Yeah. So this is working.
Okay. Oh, yeah, follow along.
Yeah, I know, but I turned it back on my computer and just doing now. Yeah, I can hear it myself. Yeah. I'll do it again. Yeah, it worked. Oh, no.
No, I don't think it does. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, no, I'm making
I'm
sure.
trying to be difficult.
No, no, you're not. No, you're not.
I think I'm getting it, but I'm not sure if I'm.
No. I thought that was working, but apparently it must not be working.
I think you have like two identities.
Yeah. There we go, we're good.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Genesee Transportation Council. Would please, Alex, the roll.
Sure. Genesee County, Ms. Stein.
Present.
Genesee County, Mr. Fever.
Present.
Monroe County Legislature, Ms. Lamar. Ontario County, Mr. Barron.
Here.
Orleans County, Ms. Johnson.
John Peppinetti representing.
Seneca County, Mr. Hasting.
Mr. Will representing.
Wayne County, Mr. Ignor.
Jim Brady, Clinton County representing.
Wyoming County, Ms. Ryan. Yates County, Ms. Church.
Tim Connor's on line.
Monroe County Executive, Mr. Annabella.
Yep, Tom Fries is here.
Monroe County Planning Board, Mr. Santos. Monroe County Supervisors Association, Mr. Schultz. Monroe County at large, Mr. Hogan.
Here.
Monroe County at large, Mr. McCann.
Scott Levis is representing.
City of Rochester Mayor Evans.
Richard Perrin representing.
Rochester City Council President Melendez. Rochester City Planning Commission, Mr. Watson. City of Rochester at large, Mr. Frisch.
Present.
Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council, Mr. Cutler.
Online.
That's it, sir. Rochester Genesee Regional Transportation Authority, Mr. Jeffries.
Bill Carpenter representing.
Empire State Development Corporation, Ms. Knight.
Steve Golding representing.
New York State DEC, Mr. Sagos.
Tim Walsh representing.
New York State DOT, Ms. Dominguez.
Joel Kleinberg representing.
New York State Thruway Authority, Mr. Driscoll.
John Carrington representing.
Federal Aviation Administration, Ms. Martinez. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Marquis. Federal Transit Administration, Mr. Goodman. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Alex.
Morning, everybody.
What are you gonna do? You just gotta.
I'll open it up this time to the public. If there's anyone in the public online that would like to address the council, I'll give them that opportunity at this time.
Staff is indicating nobody's offering
No,
comments.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of our last quarterly meeting. I'd ask for a motion in a second, please.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second for this time. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
None, that's carried. Move into communications and announcements. Jim, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phil Ignor has been elected chairman of the Wayne County Board of Supervisors. He's now a member of GTC. And Richard Sutherland has been appointed as the executive director of the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council and has been designated as an alternate to GTC. And that's the announcements.
Thank you. Move into reports and action on old business. Scott, if you would please, planning committee report.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. The planning committee met on May 12th and June 16th and recommends the GTC board accept reports as evidence of completion of 5 unified planning work programs. Yes. They are the Bay Industrial Park Traffic Optimization Study, Grant Configuration Study, Regional Fleet Electrification Study, Genesee Finger Lakes Scenario Tool, and the Village of Perry Transportation Safety and Access Study. Also adopt Title VI Non-Discrimination Implementation Plan, amend the GTC bylaws, amend the fiscal year 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program to reflect the contribution of the actual fiscal year 2021-2022 rollover amounts, and amend the fiscal year 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program as requested by the City of Batavia, Ontario County, RGRTA, and the New York State Department of Transportation. Additionally, the planning committee took the following tasks. We approved scopes of work for 6 UPWP tasks. They were the City of Rochester Downtown Sign Assessment, the Canal Ponds Business Park Connectivity Study, the Lakeview Corridor Strategic Plan, the Rural On-Demand Transit Study, the Arcade Multi-Use Trail Study, and the Village of Warsaw Active Transportation Plan. We also approved 5 administrative modifications to the federal fiscal year 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program as requested by the City of Rochester, Wayne County, Wyoming County, and New York State Department of Transportation. And they are increasing the total cost of the Farmington Road Bridge, increasing the total cost of the County Route 30 Rehabilitation Project in Wyoming County. The first one is Wayne County. Increasing the total cost of Route 33A over Erie Canal Bridge Replacement Project for New York State DOT. Deferring a phase of the Genesee Street Reconstruction Project for the City of Rochester, and increasing the federal share of the I-490 over Genesee River Bridge Rehabilitation Project for New York State Department of Transportation. That concludes the planning committee report. Thank you, Scott.
Jim, if you would please, and GTC staff report.
Yeah, so starting with good news, on June 16th, the Federal Transit Administration announced awards under the Innovative Coordinated Access and Mobility Program, ICANN program, and they awarded $240,000 to Lifespan of Greater Rochester to support the one-click regional mobility management project. The project will expand the capabilities of one-click portal for the region. Lifespan is already working with Monroe County and Ontario County on a project similar to what Livingston County had implemented a few years ago. This grant will allow Lifespan to expand the platform to additional counties and hire the regional mobility manager. Initially, the regional mobility manager will be tasked with getting this system up and online more than the traditional ride matching function that a mobility manager would have. But it would also fund the exploring technology that would create the ability to link future scheduling and booking systems, allow for online paying, and when somebody books a ride, they can pay through the service, simplifying things for the user. And like I said, it built on a grant that Lifespan got under the FTA Section 5310, which is a program that serves transportation needs for elderly and people with disabilities. So it's a good addition to their program. Also on June 23rd, Governor Hochul announced funding awards under the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, and the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, for CMIC. Of the $178.8 million awarded statewide, about $23.7 million was awarded in our region. Now, if you can go back to that for a moment. So these range from bicycle and pedestrian projects that improve safe routes to school, support non-motorized transportation trips, to projects that improve comfort for bus customers, with shelter, seating, and zero emission propulsion. All of these projects are consistent with and advance our long-range transportation plan. And as this graphic shows up here, majority of the projects were directly supported by planning studies we did at GTC. So another example of planning efforts leading to implementation. Trying to put them geographically was way too cluttered, but now we'll go to the next slide and we'll see more details about the individual projects, the project sponsors, and the funding amounts. They do go across the region. We will work with project sponsors and New York State Department of Transportation on scheduling for these projects so that we can amend them into the Transportation Improvement Program at the next meeting. Still up in the air if any of those projects need to utilize funds in the current federal fiscal year before September 30th, but I would suspect that the majority of them will be programmed for the next federal fiscal year starting October 1. Again, we'll work with project sponsors to make that happen. So that's a staff report with announcements.
Thank you. Going to some old business, federal legislative and funding update.
Yeah, so as I was preparing my notes, it took me back. It's been about 4 months since this board met. And in that time, there's been a fair bit of activity. At the last meeting, I talked about continuing resolutions for the federal budget. The second continuing resolution had funded operations through February 18th, which was around the time that we met. A third continuing resolution funded federal operations through March 11th. But one of the challenges with continuing resolution, it continued funding levels and programs from the prior year. So all the new programs under the bipartisan infrastructure law, while approved by Congress, were not yet funded, and US DOT staff was not allowed to work on that and start making those happen. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022 was signed into law on March 15th. This funds federal operations through September 30th, and good news is it allowed DOT staff to work on the new programs and get funds flowing and rulemaking going. So with that, we were able to move into the next slide, Alex. Actually making some grant opportunities. So the first one in the timeline was the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, or the RAISE Discretionary Grants Program. I mentioned this at the last meeting. This had previously been called BUILD under the Trump administration and TIGER under the Obama administration. And these were, this is the program that funded the Interloop East project in the city, as well as the Amtrak Station Revitalization project. So basically transportation projects that support economic activity have a transformative effect. Those applications were due on April 14th. I did have conversations with a few project sponsors about potential applications. The only one I'm aware of that was submitted was the Village of Webster, and they're working with Xerox actually to convert some of the private roads to public roads, bring them up to public standard, and then be able to open up parcels on that campus for new development where existing infrastructure is, where there's infrastructure needs to be expanded. So we'll see what happens with that. The project has got a lot of local support and has already had some initial grants from the state to look at efforts. So now it's about trying to implement it. The Safe Streets and Roads for All is a new program under the BIL. I noticed a funding opportunity was released on May 16th. Grant applications are due in September 8th. Yeah, so this is a program that looked at a safe systems approach to try to improve. Basically, we talk about complete streets. This makes it safer for all users, not just those in vehicles. One of the things that we're looking at is staff pursuing a planning grant. You have to have certain plans in place, believe Alex, in order to utilize these funds for implementation, you have to have, what's the name of the plan?
Comprehensive Safety Action Plan.
Yeah. So we're looking at pursuing a planning grant on that, and whether it would make sense to do it trying for a federal grant or looking to do it as part of our annual work program with the funds we get for planning activities. Might be simpler and certainly more sure that we have the funds. I know the city of Rochester is interested. Karen Ramsey from Rich's staff has reached out and trying to see what we're doing from a regional approach instead of duplicating efforts. So our staff is actually meeting on this next week to talk about a path forward from what Alex has researched. So more to come on that. Another notice of funding opportunity on June 10th was for the Bridge Improvement Program. This one, when the infrastructure bill was announced and they talk about, well, we're going to fix 15,000 bridges across the country. This is, one of the ways they're going to do that. But the program has some thresholds, some criteria that make it a little bit challenging. The projects have to have at least $2.5 million federal share, and there is quite a bit of criteria that they will be looking at. It's spelled out, and projects are not responsive, they're responsive or highly responsive. And I think it's in our interest to do some screening. As I advised North County DOT, if we can't reasonably come up with highly responsive to each criteria, competitively, it's not going to do well when it's Secretary Buttigieg announcing, selecting the projects essentially with staff. So we'll get through the TIP development process, and I think our first pool of candidates will be the bridges that were not funded. Screening goes for potential for projects, and it's a bit of a heavy lift. Another key criterion is cost benefit analysis, and if it doesn't score at least a 1.5 on the cost benefit analysis, it's not highly responsive. So again, between the $2.5 million and the 1.5 CBA, we should do some screening before I put effort into an application. Staff is going to continue to monitor new opportunities. I discussed last time, we have on the GTC website our funding opportunities, and with that I call it Peel the Onion. We have some initial information about a program. If you think it's something that is worth your community pursuing, you can drill down some more information. There's links to resources from the USDOT related to the bipartisan infrastructure law, and folks can sign up for email notifications that we'll send out when we post new information or new funding opportunities.
Okay, quick question. Is there any money that is flowed yet from this federal infrastructure bill? Any dollars received?
Very little. Part of the challenge is that it's coming to states by formula, and then the states are redistributing it. I'd say at the regional level, we had a modest increase in our STP large urban and our safety funds, but essentially all of our funding programs were flat from prior cycles. Part of the challenge is there's a lot of discretionary in this, that because USDOT couldn't work on any of the new programs until March, some of it's just not flowed yet. I don't know if anybody, Bill or Rich, from your perspective, if you.
What was the increase in the National Highway Performance Program? What was it?
I'm sorry to hear you.
What was the increase in the National Highway Performance Program?
At the regional level?
No, I'm not asking at the regional level, I'm saying at the national level.
I don't have that stat in front of me, but I think it's something like 25 to 30%.
It was at least 20%, and the amount that comes directly to us was in like 3 to 4%.
I don't even think it was that much.
And NISDOT, Joel can probably speak to it, but NISDOT published it. I mean, concrete prices or asphalt's up 45% and steel's 43%. Those are numbers. So, we got basically the states made out with getting more. Obviously, transit did because it was a more multimodal bill. Yeah, it was something that actually brought the modes together. But no, a lot of this increase, as you know, is discretionary, which is going to get picked by Office of the Secretary of Transportation, OST, as part of the administration. So,
right. So
I wouldn't say regions did very well on this bill.
No. So to your question, has it flowed to the region? Not yet.
Well said.
And what we're doing through our TIP development process, funding, with the exception of, I think, about a 10% increase in our STP large urban, was not a big number to start with, and increase in our safety number, our safety program. We haven't seen an increase.
Show me the money.
Say again?
Show me the money.
Do we have
I can show it, you see it on TV.
Do we have any numbers on how much has been allocated versus what's remaining to be?
From the national bill, I can get that for you, but basically they parse it out on an annual basis. So the appropriations have been made for 2022, which would be about 20% of the 5-year bill. But we can follow up with how much has been appropriated versus how much in the bill. And we'll get something out to the board members before the next meeting. Any other, federal, any other questions on the federal legislative funding? Okay, that concludes my report on that.
Thank you, Jim. The meeting packet did have the tip staff modification report, and I'll ask it anytime right now if there's any questions on that, staff can answer them.
Just a reminder, those are relatively minor changes that have been delegated to the staff level, but before the staff makes this change, we do vet them with the TIP Development Committee representatives from counties across the region. And there were no objections.
Thank you. We have some action items to consider this morning. I'll ask if anyone has any objection to the UPWP closeout considered under one action. Any member or alternate, like one voted on separately or grouped together, we could entertain that. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion in a second, please. To
I'm sorry. Something on the screen? Oh.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Okay. Sorry about that.
All set? Good. We'll have a motion in a second to consider the UPW tasks.
James Hours.
First.
1 second.
Thank you. All those in favor will have provided.
Great, thank you. So proposed resolutions 2214 through 16 were reviewed and recommended for your approval by the planning committee on May 12th, while resolutions 2219 and 2220 were recommended for your approval by the planning committee on June 16th. First project, the Bay Industrial Park traffic optimization. This is a study that was conducted by the town of Ontario. And the purpose of the project was to develop a plan to support continued growth and development of the Bay Industrial Park by identifying and evaluating the alternatives for enhancing traffic circulation with an emphasis on goods movement within and around the park. And the aim of the study is to improve current conditions at the Route 104 and Dean Parkway intersection and explore alternative routes to access the industrial park. This is out on Route 104 and probably most known for the wind turbines outside of Harbeck Plastic and the Intergrove tomato greenhouses. I think they're up to about 1 million square feet of greenhouse. So yeah, it's nice to go to your local market and have tomatoes grown right here in our region. A series of improvements to Route 104 and Dean Parkway were proposed and analyzed that intersection, and as part of an upcoming capital project along Route 104, NISDOT is planning to install pedestrian signals, crosswalks, and sidewalk pads in that intersection, as well as a new traffic signal that includes mast arms and high visibility backplates along all 5 of the intersections that were reviewed as part of the report. So it's not just Dean Parkway, but along the corridor. And also, NISDOT will be lengthening the eastbound left turn lane into Dean Parkway. So already some recommendations being implemented. The study did identify a new access road along County Line Road. Homeowners along County Line Road were notified of opportunities to give their input and comment on the alternative. A new access point would alleviate traffic congestion on 104 at Dean Parkway, because that is the only point of access and egress to this park right now. But putting in a second access point would also open up some development opportunities on the western portion of the industrial park. But this road does require more analysis before it can be implemented. So not a firm project yet. The next project is the ramp reconfiguration study. This is a project that GTC conducted on behalf of NISDOT. The purpose of the project was to assess the current ramp configurations at 2 interchanges, that being the 490, 590, and the 590 and 104, with the intent of investigating lane configuration alternatives to address safety, efficiency, congestion issues at those intersections, or interchanges, I'm sorry. Project steering committee included representatives from NISDOT, of course, also Monroe County, the city of Rochester, and the towns of Brighton, Pittsburgh, Penfield, Irondequoit, and Webster, because of the traffic where these interchanges serve and the interchanges in between. So it was important to get the towns in the conversation. The needs assessment identified 5 main areas of concern. 4 of those were at the 590, 490 interchange, and 1 of them was at the 104, 590 interchange. And those issues are primarily related to the short distances between the decision points on the highway where merging and weaving has to occur, and greatest conflict points. The study identified 8 potential design concepts to address these concerns, but 2 of those concepts were discarded as being feasible. And the remaining 6 concepts can address various issues, but need more detailed analysis before they can be. The next study was the regional fleet electrification study. This project was conducted by the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council staff. And the purpose was to develop a strategy for advancing fleet electrification in our region. And not sure, fleet electrification is the process of converting existing fleets from fossil fuel sources to electricity. And there's a need to better understand and document this process, which is why the study was done. I did include the entire region, and the focus was on public fleets, but the lessons learned out of this study are also applicable to private fleets. And the report was organized into several sections: an introduction to fleet electrification, an overview of the regional economic and workforce development opportunities that can emerge from supporting electric vehicle adoption, summary of lessons learned from 3 case study partners. Those partners were RGRTA, the City of Rochester, and Fairport Electric. There was a review of recommendations, including federal, state, and local government actions to support electrification. These could be things like electric vehicle support policies, charging station deployment, public education, and outreach about electric vehicles. And lastly, how-to guides to provide fleet operators with step-by-step guides to undertaking a fleet electrification process. This whole concept of fleet electrification is still in the early stages, so there may be opportunities for future studies as more information about fleet electrification becomes available or new products come to market. So I think this is going to be a continuous learning opportunity. The next project is the Genesee Finger Lakes Scenario Tool. This is an effort undertaken by GTC staff, and the purpose was to deploy a scenario planning tool to support our own staff planning activities, excuse me, and support member agency projects relating to transportation and land use. The study area was the full 9-county region, and saw synergy in having an overall regional framework would analyze the interrelated impacts of land use and transportation. The project was progressed in 2 phases. The first phase was really exploratory. It focused on the selection of a preferred tool, understanding what our needs were, and we needed a tool that would balance both capabilities and accessibility from a wide range of users. Our initial period of having the platform included access for each county planning department and the city of Rochester to essentially have a seat at our platform. Although they've not, and none of them have opted to continue that, we as a staff are continuing to have this model and make it available for any of our member agencies and communities that want to use it to support their planning efforts. As part of the second phase, it centered on deployment of the tool. And in order to deploy it, we first had to create a model of the place types and essentially to represent the towns, villages, and cities. Next, we had to calibrate our various analysis modules within that model, and that then led to creating baseline and model assumptions for growth and development. We then built two different growth scenarios, one to get to 2050. The first would be a trend scenario where continuing existing development patterns, and the second was an alternative growth scenario to be able to compare and contrast. And in order to gain some experience with the tool and to really test it out, we did do two pilot studies. The first was for Genesee County, and it was part of your comprehensive plan update, working with the county planning department. And one of the things we helped them do is assess the impacts of maintaining their existing smart growth zones through 2050 versus not following those growth zones and going to more open development. And the fiscal impacts model highlighted that they would get 4 times more tax revenue on a per acre basis, keeping the existing smart growth zones versus allowing a more open sprawl growth pattern. And would also reduce the amount of needed infrastructure investment in the future. And as I understand it, this was a key factor in the county deciding to maintain those smart growth patterns. It was very real world use for this tool. The second study focused on the West Main Street corridor and the Wolves Head redevelopment area of the city of Rochester. We used the public health assessment model within this tool and to calculate the impacts of the built environment and changes on chronic disease. This study area, when you compare it to the city as a whole or Monroe County as a whole, has less green space and less extent of street trees, which really do have an impact on health. And it looked at an alternative of bringing the street cover and green space up closer to what the city as a whole experiences. And just by doing that, which doesn't seem transportation related, but it is that environment where the people intersect with transportation, the expected result would be some pretty significant reductions in chronic disease such as obesity, coronary heart disease, blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. One of the things that we found is that residents in this area, their annual expenditures on healthcare is about twice the regional average. So folks are exposed to more soot, more pollution, more dust, more noise. So it really does have an impact, and we were able to show through the model that some little changes can make a big difference in people's lives. The next project, Village of Perry, Transportation Safety and Access Study was conducted by the Village of Perry. The purpose of the project was to develop a study to improve safety and accessibility of pedestrian and bicycle connections, primarily along Center Street, which is also State Route 246, and also between the Center Street and Village anchors, such as the school district campus, parks, the downtown area, and Silver Lake Trail. For purpose of the study, the corridor was divided into 3 contact zones. The southern and middle sections were primarily residential, and the northern end of the northern sections were primarily commercial. The study noted that the northern commercial section has poor access management, lacks sidewalks, and there's a need for improved drainage. And proposed improvements would add curbing, define the shoulders, add sidewalks, planting and lighting along that corridor, potentially for a gateway treatment. Would also include access management and drainage improvements. And together these elements would tie tie together the growing employment-based medical services, school campus, and retail services, and really create a more inviting realm that people could walk or bicycle instead of needing to get in their car and get from spot to spot. The middle and southern sections were a little less intense, but do include proposals. Recommendations include sidewalk rehabilitation, removal of complicated gaps that in order to ensure ADA continuity throughout the corridor. There are 2 retaining walls and a former train trestle with potentially historic elements. These are some complicating factors, and those elements would require some additional engineering to try to determine any preferred alternatives in those vicinities. That's all the study closeouts. With that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tim. Any further discussion on these closeouts? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. I'd like to ask for a motion in a second for Jim to provide an overview on the Title VI discrimination claims. So, second. Motion in a second. Jim, if you would, please.
Thank you. So this resolution 22-17 was reviewed and recommended for approval by the planning committee at the May 12th meeting. Development of the plan was conducted by GTC staff, and the purpose is to document policies and expectations to ensure continuous compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other additional non-discrimination authorities and executive orders. Since GTC is the subrecipient of federal metropolitan planning funds from both the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration, we are required to comply with Title VI, which prohibits discrimination based upon race, color, or national origin. There are additional authorities and executive orders that protect against discrimination based on gender, age, disability, low income status, limited English proficiency. So these are things that we had always adhered to, but haven't necessarily documented in a plan in quite a few years. So if you go to the next slide, I'll see. We do have a notice of non-discrimination policy. This notice is posted in our office, and these statements are included in all of our major studies and studies conducted on behalf of GTC. Have to include this statement as well. So when we get into the plan itself, it includes demographic data and analysis of our planning region. Can you go to the next slide? Some of the ongoing activities we are doing to reduce the barriers to participate, our various assurances, public notice templates, and various supplemental plans, such as how we try to address limited English proficiency. A draft plan, a Title VI plan, was submitted to the NISDOT Office of Civil Rights for review and comment. Staff did address those comments before finalizing this plan and going to the planning committee with it. Once this board adopts the plan, it will be submitted again to the Office of Civil Rights for final approval. And in our federal certification review, it was recommended that we update this more regularly. So we have a framework in place to update this every 2 years. We have graphic information technologies, but by and large, we've been doing well. We don't have any complaints on record. In my nearly 22 years at GTC, I don't think we've ever had a complaint. So we're doing the right thing. We just haven't necessarily compiled it in a comprehensive document. And with that, I'll answer questions you might have.
I just want to thank the GTC staff. The request that I made at the planning committee level was that the city be broken out in the tables. I think there's pretty stark contrast there between the rest of the region on these items, particularly to population and minorities, low-income persons, whether they're English proficiency, persons with disabilities, and similar. I appreciate that.
The numbers are, when you look at the numbers of people, it's quite high, and that's, given the population of the city, just looking at the percentage sometimes doesn't give you the full picture. But as you can see on this table, almost see. Monroe County is, we have a countywide figure and then basically a sub-figure for City of Rochester. The countywide figure does include City of Rochester. Take that out, we want to break out in response to the request from the city. Here's, and we do this for all the demographics.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting this plan?
Aye.
Opposed? None carried. I'd like to ask for a motion in a second for Jim to provide an overview for some changes to the GTC bylaws.
Second.
Second. Would please, Jim?
Okay, just by way of background, our bylaws currently require the GTC board to adhere to the New York State Open Meetings Law. During the COVID emergency, we did demonstrate an ability to conduct business in an open manner using technology that doesn't require meeting participants and observers to be physically in the same room. And this had been permitted under emergency waivers from Governor Cuomo and Governor Hochul. But those waivers have lapsed because the COVID emergency is easing. So technically we have to adhere to the open meetings law again. But GTC, along with our counterparts from across the state, we're exploring this question, what the requirements can be. We have observed since going to remote meetings in May of 2020 that there's been an increase in the level of observation of public viewing our planning committee meetings, our board meetings. So we feel like we're getting greater exposure and greater participation. And the meetings are also, in addition to being live streamed, they're recorded and archived so somebody can view them later. So based on a request from another MPO, the New York State Committee on Open Government looked into the question of MPOs being subject to open meetings law and has issued an opinion that MPOs are established pursuant to federal requirements and therefore not subject to the open meetings law. So from a state perspective, we're not required to do it. It's only our bylaws that require it. So as I said, the other MPOs across the state, they're also trying to deal with how, or working with how to deal with this. And this requirement to adhere to the open meetings law, this was a decision of predecessors on this board. As I said, it's in the bylaws, you have the ability to change that. So staff looked at alternatives, how we might be able to open this up, and while still meeting the spirit of law, and we determined the simplest approach would be tweaking the Article 7, Section 1, which basically instead of saying we can be held in accordance with the open meetings law, that will be open to the public and conducted in the spirit of the open meetings law, and use our public engagement plan to lay out the specific requirements. That is something that's, we don't want to reopen bylaws very often, but the public engagement plan, we update every few years, and I think it's a 5-year cycle on the public engagement plan? 3. So we have the opportunity to adapt to new technologies and set new requirements. We will continue to have in-person meetings. We'll set them up as hybrid, but what this will allow is remote participants to count towards quorum at future meetings to be able to participate in the votes. But you know, by good practice and policy, internal policy, GTC being a transportation agency, as long as I'm here, I suspect my successors that we will meet in a location that is accessible by public transportation. People shouldn't necessarily have to drive to get there. I've made comments in the past about certainly we want to be in an accessible building, but some of the weather we have in our region, what's more accessible than never needing to leave your home. So remember the public joining online and participating in our meetings and using technology, the platforms we set up, we try to reduce those barriers to participation. You don't need a computer or smartphone. You can dial in with a telephone. That phone number is toll free, so it's not a cost to the person at the other end. We have built into our live streaming platform, there is language translation on the fly, there is closed captioning on the fly, voice recognition. It's not perfect, but it's close. Members of the public can leave a recorded message, they can send a text message, they can chat to the function. We can open up an audio bridge, they can actually talk to the committee in real time, whether it's the board or the planning committee. So we, again, try to reduce those barriers to participation. With that, I'll try to answer any questions you have.
Any further discussion on amending the bylaws?
I guess I have a question. I get that the wording is meant to.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
So I get that the wording is meant to be broad to maybe account for future changes, and maybe that's the answer. But the spirit of, just making sure that, I'm wondering why it couldn't be further defined.
I think we were trying to convey that we don't want to look like we're ducking the open meetings law requirement. We still want to meet the intention. And maybe intention is better than spirit. But the whole idea is we still want to be open to the public. We still want to, in essence, meet all the requirements we have to meet. But the biggest restriction for us was meeting in person. As noted today, there was an emphasis. We need 11 people in the room at least. And when people are traveling from the 9-county area, being able to participate without necessarily having to travel so far is a benefit to members. But if folks feel that spirit is too vague, is what conducted with the intention of the open meetings law, is that any better? Again, the public engagement plan that we update regularly is going to specify what we have to do. And that's where we set the specific actions and requirements of staff.
Okay.
Yeah, it just is someone that is trying to get our 15 commissioners in person now, rather than virtual. We had very productive virtual meetings. We've got folks coming from Warsaw, Geneseo, Albion, Lyons, winter weather. We will lose their ability to participate now that the executive orders are done. I have a number of commissioners who found it to be much easier to be active members to a virtual platform than needed to be in person. So I live this pain, and I'm excited for GTC. We're glad to continue to host. It's a long transport for me from my office down here. So I would intend to do it in person, but for those that lose that much productive time to come to a meeting, it's to continue to require the in-person aspect to it when the public can participate so easily. I think is not recognizing how much technology has improved the ability to have a virtual setting work very well.
Yeah, I think it's the open meetings law go back 25, 30 years ago. The technology we have today just plain didn't exist. And when they talk about video conferencing in the open meetings law, they're talking about specially equipped rooms and building, state building from one to the other. The idea of the public being able to observe and being in the room, you don't want backdoor deals, you don't want secret stuff going on. But right now, the public is seeing the exact same video stream and hearing the same thing as our members and alternates that are calling in from their homes. So in that regard, they're getting access that they didn't have before without being physically present. And do we have any idea if this is actually still streaming?
The volume is.
Okay, I'm glad the volume's going, even though the video's not. But yeah, despite the staff who's right now, the technology.
Actually,
I'm sure.
that's a great question. I know some places they're not subject to open meetings law, and they just do virtual meetings because the hybrid, it's either in person or virtual. The hybrid is problematic, and you all probably have the best system I've experienced, and it's still problematic. And also the interaction between the people who are here and the people on Zoom aren't as good.
Well, that
because
interaction
I'm
is.
looking at you and not the camera, you know, whereas if we were all in one big gallery, we would all be kind of on the same.
Yeah, so, there is that dynamic of, like I said, sort of seeing a picture of the room and not the individual faces. That, you know, maybe as we adapt, we just switched over using Zoom instead of WebEx. We're still learning that process. I think this is the first board meeting using Zoom. And yeah, it's a rapidly evolving mechanism, but there's still, I think, a lot to be said of people gathering in the room and building relationships and having that personal connection. But it does recognize, you know, as Bill pointed out, you know, some of the distances that people are traveling. You know, Jim Brady came in from Lions. I think who traveled far, you know, mid-year. You had a shorter trip than going to work, right? Yeah. But, you know, we have people online that didn't have to travel too far. And, you know, when people are conscientious about their carbon footprint and conscientious about prices of gas, I mean, Jim came up from that.
The environmental benefit is something.
Yeah, so we think it is, it's going to help going forward. And Rochelle, as you said, the ability to be productive is there. As Bill commented, the time lost is a real challenge for some folks. So we're hoping that this only makes it better and respects the public's ability to observe what's going on and give their feedback.
I totally agree. You know, I think on council, we've been struggling with this as well to continue to have the public engagement that we were getting and have hybrid. You guys are way ahead of us. My question is more like, why not include the specific language around, you know, the technology? Was it just to have it be able to be more flexible in the future? Should we need, you know, to further?
Yeah, exactly. So the bylaws say, hey, you got to do this, but the public engagement plan is going to specify, you know, are we using video capabilities, maybe something different. I think back to years, 20 years ago, when I was looking at our public engagement plan, and there was something that said, oh, we'll broadcast all the meetings on public access television. It was written in the plan, but nobody took the effort to make that happen. So the idea of being careful of what you specify where, and like I said, the bylaws, we don't want to be reopening the bylaws very often. So the bylaws are going to reference this public engagement plan, which can be adapted, which gets vetted through the planning committee and ultimately adopted by the board, which is more, it's easier to adapt to technology changes. So we want to set the framework and use some flexibility of how to get it done, because you know, if this happens again, we might be having to switch up our technology again. But this is unusual. We haven't had this happen before. I apologize to those who are listening because they can't see us right now.
Thanks, Jim. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of amending the bylaws? Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Next, I look for a motion in a second for Jim to provide an overview on the unified
if you can hear us in the live connection, the live meeting, we lost our volume connection.
Yeah, Eric, I just text Jack Marin in the room, see if they knew that.
Thanks, Peter. We'll figure this out.
Yeah, I also texted Lori Marr.
Yeah, Jack says they're trying to work on it.
And Brandon is not available to any other.
I was thinking, what a great little access point here.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yep, let's do back up tomorrow.
Okay, so what we've summarized on the screen here is the net adjustments. Typically you would only see the budgets go down, but as I said, we had a bump up in the FTA funds, so there's a net or a smaller decrease than might otherwise be seen in other agencies. And also we had those that were here last year will recall we created a healthcare contingency. The way our healthcare is set up with certain portions self-funded, we had run into situations in the past where some employees have been hit with some significant, or I should say, employees and their families had significant healthcare needs, and it created an impact to our health insurance expenditures. We created that contingency so that in the future, if there's anything extraordinary, for example, an intensive care stay and emergency surgery, which is something that an employee's family had experienced. We set aside savings from last year in the amount of $100,000 to have in case something happened. Thankfully, come March 31st, nothing happened. So that those funds become freed up to be able to utilize on other projects. $80,000 of our highway administration planning funds and $20,000 of federal transit administration funds. Staff has, over the past year, we've identified an emerging need to look at pedestrian facilities, update our pedestrian facilities inventory, but we want to take advantage of some of the technologies out there, devices that you can go out in the field and do data collection, using things like Google Earth and Google Maps to identify where you might look. So we approached the UPWP Development Committee to create an effort within our bicycle and pedestrian transportation program to update our bicycle or our pedestrian facilities inventory. We've reached out. The City of Rochester has, is a willing participant to be a pilot. We want to use the first year to acquire equipment and develop our processes to be able to make that happen. We've had some interesting exchanges with students from the University of Rochester who developed different apps and things. There might be an opportunity to partner up with folks at U of R, make it a continuous project that would engage the students with the community. I had a request from Lions this morning, like, hey, you guys, can you look at sidewalk conditions? So that could be potentially a second pilot community where our city neighborhoods, our rural village and sidewalks in the surrounding town, that environment. But we'd like to use $25,000 the first year to start that program and $25,000 per year off the top, based primarily funding interns from that point forward to do the annual data collection efforts and share that information with municipalities, understanding what is the condition of their pedestrian facilities, where they have crosswalks and ADA ramps, and what the condition where you have a sidewalk that's got a lip that's a tripping hazard, where a sidewalk's too narrow, things so that facility owners have the information and they can use that data to whatever way they want. We did have, when the idea was proposed, State DOT had raised a question like, oh, do we have to worry about liability? So we did reach out to our counterparts across the state. We have other MPOs are collecting this data, and basically the way it's looked at, it's a data collection effort, and the facility owners can choose to use it or not. So it's not a liability concern. And again, the PWP Development Committee concurred with using $25,000 of that, $100,000 that was freed up. The remainder would be part of the revenue for the next call for projects that is coming out in September. Any questions about the budget change?
Thanks, Jim. There's no other further discussion. All those in support of amending the fiscal year 22-23 unified plan. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Next, we have some amendments to consider. Propose that they be considered under single action. If anyone has any individual resolutions they'd like to be separated out, or combining any resolutions, we could entertain any requests at this time. Hearing none, I look for a motion in a second, then we'll consider them all under one action. Motion in a second. Go ahead, please, Jim.
Thank you. Proposed resolutions 22-22 through 22-38 were reviewed and recommended for your approval by the Planning Committee as June 16th meeting. The first project, the County Road 4, County Road 20 intersection, is an amendment requested by Ontario County. The cost increase reflects the latest engineering estimate, and the higher construction costs are being experienced across the board, as Rich mentioned, the inflation in steel, asphalt, everything else that's concrete. But additionally, when they got into the design, they realized there would be some more extensive earthwork than originally contemplated for the project. So that is the reason for the cost increase. The next project is, the City of Batavia Highway Preventive Maintenance Project. And this cost change reflects the low bid received for the project. So that's a firm number. The next project is the I-590 bridges over Route 31 and Allen's Creek. This is an amendment requested by NISDOT. And again, the cost increase reflects the latest engineer's estimate. And that estimate is affected by higher construction costs relative to prior years. Same situation for the Route 31 from Monroe County line to the Hamlet of Macedon. Latest engineer's estimate is higher than what we had previously programmed. The I-390 over Erie Canal barrier and fascia replacement project. Again, latest estimate reflects reflecting higher materials costs. The next one, deferring phases of Route 15A or East Henrietta Road from the thruway to 390. This amendment is requested by NISDOT. Within the project limits, they've identified some work that needs to be done on culverts, but they need some additional time to design that culvert work and require right-of-way to be able to work on those culverts. So
Can you go back one slide, Jim?
and again, revise the estimate to reflect higher costs.
Yeah, but I have a question. It says increase the total cost from 1,586,700 to 1,023. The decrease?
Oh, the previous project, I think.
No.
No, it's over.
Alex, do you have, let me check the resolution. That is a mistake on the slide for sure. Thank you for catching that, Tom.
Okay.
So,
Is it the same with the next one down? Oh, no, I'm sorry, never mind.
I just want to make sure we have it correct in the resolution. I suspect we do. It's just an error on the slide. But, I'm sorry. Yeah, they should. Can you switch back to the slide?
See, on 391, the resolution says increase from 1,586,700 to 2,190.
Okay. Oh, so you got to quick. Yeah, Tom, that the new amount should be approximately 2.1 million. The resolution has it correct. Thank you for getting to that first bridge. The slide is correct.
Okay, thanks.
And I appreciate you catching that. Go back to show the slide. Okay, give Alex a moment to get the slide back up on the screen for everybody to see. And not that we don't want to see Tom, but okay. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we got I'm sorry, was it? All right, so now we're on to the Route 204, which is Brooks Avenue near the airport, from Route 33A to the Rochester City line. It's an amendment requested by NISDOT. For those familiar with the area, the Brooks Avenue dips down under the railroad overpass, and there is a specialized stormwater pumping system there, because obviously the water settles there. But due to the complexities of this, they required specific engineering expertise and more time to complete design, so they've asked to defer the construction phase. And the cost increase, again, is the latest engineer's estimate reflecting the higher cost of materials. One thing of note is there's a shift in the federal fund sources. A portion of this project, so it would be east of 390, is not on a national highway system and therefore not eligible for the National Highway Performance Program funds. But the TIP Development Committee recommended, and the planning committee concurred, that use STP large urban funds and a prorated share to cover that piece. So the project's still funded, fully funded. The I-490 preventive maintenance from Garnsey Road to I-90 project is another amendment requested by NISDOT. They are requested to change the delay the construction so that they can coordinate with the work zone operations of the I-490 over Erie Canal Red Road Bridge replacement projects. The bridge replacements are already going to require lane closures and complex work zones, so they want to align the work zones for the two consecutive projects. The next group of projects are all related to public transportation. Each year, RGRTA has to develop a program of projects that has its own public review process and staff approval from the Federal Transit Administration. So essentially, you can think of this as rebalancing their program. The first project is increase in the cost of preventive maintenance. In reality, this more fully reflects the actual cost of preventive maintenance on vehicles, but it also utilizes FTA funds freed up by some changes to other projects that are taking advantage of accelerated capital funds from New York State. The next slide is the associated transit improvements. Again, amendment request by RGRTA. And what this is doing actually is maintaining RGRTA's commitment to use 1% of its FTA Section 5307 funds. These are funds for transit operations in large urban areas. In the past, it was a requirement they use 1% for customer amenities. That requirement is no longer there, but RGRTA has maintained that commitment to better serve their customers and the comfort of their customers. The increase is due to the full year budget appropriation, increasing the amount of Section 5307 funds coming to RGRTA. The next amendment would combine two existing replacement projects, bus replacement projects, and then reduces the overall quantity based on projected fleet replacement needs. Excuse me. The next project is to change the vehicle size from 60-foot buses to 40-foot buses based on, and change the quantity based on projected fleet replacement needs again. And the cost change reflects the current estimates for new buses. And I'm not certain, but Bill, do you know these electric buses, is that why their unit costs for the 40-footers so much higher?
We want to have money to do the electric buses if they're.
Okay. Yeah, so you'll see why does a 40-foot bus cost more than a 60-foot bus, and it has to do with electric buses being more expensive than diesel buses. The next project is increasing the total cost of the RTS Access Paratransit Facility amendment, again requested by RGRTA. The project is currently in the TIP just for the initial design and site screening activities. RGRTA has identified a preferred site and they want to proceed with the project. This change adds funds to complete the design, acquire the site, and build the new facility.
To design.
Oh, this only design. Okay, I'm sorry.
And acquire the site. Not to.
And acquire line. Thank you for that clarification. Strike my notes about building the new facility. That's a future need. Increasing the next project, increasing the total cost to replace paratransit buses. Again, cost change reflects the latest unit cost for these vehicles. Now moving into adding some new projects to the mix with available funding. So on-demand vehicles, as I mentioned earlier, the on-demand service was introduced last year and has proven quite popular. And in these areas where fixed route buses pull back, RGRTA is seeking additional vehicles to expand the availability of that service. And I think some areas like town of Greece, they can't meet the demand for vehicles they have available. So looking to increase those and potentially using those in other parts of the region. The next project, adding the garage design and environmental review project. This is a new project. It would fund the design and environmental review of a new bus garage that would be dedicated to zero emission buses. Right now, our GRT is equipped to store and recharge 20 electric buses in an existing garage. But however, retrofitting the existing garages for more zero emission vehicles is more complicated than building a new facility that's dedicated and designed to accommodate zero emission from the get-go. Recently, our GRT opened a new advanced environmental services building where buses are washed, fluids are maintained. The relocation or the building that building on a different site allowed demolition of the old building and create space for the bus garage. And I believe it would have capacity for 80 vehicles. So quite a change and allow more buses to be stored under a roof instead of outside in our wonderful Rochester weather. Come with your time. The last project is adding Connection Hubs Phase 2 project. This is a new project to build a connection hub on Highland Drive. Our GRTA has been holding off on building that because they're doing in coordination with the University of Rochester Medical Center building a new medical facility at the Marketplace Mall, one of the old anchor stores. I believe the facility will be dedicated to orthopedics, have surgical centers, doctor visits, and the like. So now that that's progressed far enough along, the connection hub can be designed and construction to serve that facility better than down on Highland Avenue, or Highland Drive rather. The other piece of this project is to relocate the existing connection hub in the Irondequoit Plaza. The developer, the plaza owner has a new commercial development going into where the current site is, current connection hub is located. So the connection hub is being displaced and they're looking at a couple different options in that plaza to continue to serve a pretty popular connection hub between the on-demand service and the virtual service. With that, I'll answer questions you might have.
Jim, I know that typically, just given that some of these, you know, obviously where you're designing and things like that, is there any thought being maybe given in the future to bring them into the boxes that we have? Because we do have scoping, preliminary engineering, detailed design, acquisition, incidentals, construction, inspection. And I would think a lot of those would apply to be clearer than just putting in another, so you're not like, oh, we're building a building when it's just a design phase.
Yeah, we haven't given that a lot of thought because traditionally transit projects have been other, but I think you raise a good point, and we can check with Federal Transit Administration and see their preference on it. I think traditionally it's been under a single phase for their obligations and to work on the backside of the Federal Transit.
As far as I haven't checked with FTA, why don't we just leave it as it is? This is fine, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. I like the idea. I just worry about the backside of it.
Forgot about that. Never mind.
That's why we try to capture that in the descriptions. And I know FTA is particular about the descriptions. Even when you see the write-up for the ADA, the RTS access, it's a replacement facility. You know, there's terminology that they're pretty particular about. So, any other questions on tip amendments?
Sounds good. Hearing no other discussion on these tip amendments, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's carried. Is there any new business to be brought forward this morning?
I don't have any new business.
Looks like our next meeting is at this location, August 25th.
Yes.
Same.
or online.
Online.
But staff will be here, whoever is able to make it in person, we welcome that. We'll have the ability for more participants, members and alternates to count towards the quorum and participate.
That was good. There's no other further business. I'd ask for a motion in a second for adjournment, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah, that was great.